Well, welcome to the 500th Complete Streets Policy Celebration, and we're glad to have you all here at the American Public Transportation Association headquarters in Washington, D.C. And we're all excited about having so many of us join us via webcast as well. So, and also please join us in the conversation on Twitter using hashtag 500policies. I'm Rich Weaver, Director of Planning, Policy, and Sustainability at APTA, and the chair of the National Complete Streets Coalition. And I want to thank the sponsors of this webcast, without whom it would not be possible. That would be Nelson Nygaard, Bike Walk Tennessee, and the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. And I also want to thank some of my fellow coalition steering committee members who are here today. Now, APTA has long been committed to the complete streets concept, supporting the idea that streets can and should work better for people who are taking public transportation, and making sure that they can access the stops and stations in their communities by foot, bike, wheelchair, or car. And back in 2005 or so, when we decided to formalize the National Complete Streets Coalition, we set what we thought would be an ambitious goal. That was complete streets policies in 5 states and 25 communities. And it turns out we had a concept on our hands that was bigger than we'd imagined. Today, we count policies in 29 states, including the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, 45 metropolitan planning organizations, 39 counties, and 412 cities in almost every state. And Complete Streets is an approach to transportation that inspires citizens, community groups, elected officials, and transportation professionals. It opens the doors to new or expanded benefits, improved access to transit, more opportunities to walk or bicycle, be healthy, safer streets for children and older adults, and attractive commercial centers, among dozens of other reasons. The National Complete Streets Coalition continues to work for the adoption and implementation of the Complete Streets approach, creating useful materials, providing technical assistance to communities, and setting the course for Complete Streets implementation. Today, we are joined by a terrific group of Complete Streets leaders representing a variety of organizations' interest in working for Complete Streets. The panelists will present their perspectives, and then we're going to join in a facilitated discussion, then take questions from the audience. So let me take this time to introduce our panel, and then we'll start the program. First, we have Ken Wagenschutz, who was here. He has earned his Bachelor's of Business Administration and Master's of City and Regional Planning at the University of Memphis. After several years spent as a logistics manager for a local community trader, Kyle was hired as the first bicycle pedestrian coordinator for the city of Memphis in September 2010. So since 2010, Memphis added more than 40 miles of new bicycle lanes, received an honorable mention as bicycle-friendly community by the League of American Bicyclists, and was named Most Improved City for Cycling by Bicycling Magazine in 2012. And since 2006, Kyle has served as the director of Revolution's Community Bicycle Shop, a nonprofit bicycle shop focused on teaching bicycle repair and providing affordable bicycles. Kyle is also on the board of directors of Bike Walk Tennessee, a statewide advocacy group focused on improving conditions throughout the state of Tennessee for active transportation through education, political policy, and grassroots campaigning. Next on our panel is Art Gazzetti. Many of you may know Art. He is vice president in the policy department at the American Public Transportation Association, and my boss, and he's a 32-year veteran of public transportation at the local, state, and national levels. Among other things, he is responsible for APTA's extensive policy research agenda, policy analysis, development, transportation information, and statistics. He and the APTA team work with the legislative and executive branches at all levels of government and with other national associations, think tanks, interest groups to cultivate the ideas, relationships, and advocacy initiatives that will propel public transportation forward. Prior to coming to APTA in June 1997, Art spent 16 years in management at two of the nation's leading public transportation systems. That would be New Jersey Transit Corporation and Pittsburgh's Port Authority of Allegheny County, along with that 2 years at New Jersey Department of Transportation. Next on our panel will be Colleen Hawkinson, manages the Strategic Planning Branch at the District's Department of Transportation. And as part of the agency's policy, planning, and sustainability administration, she is responsible for the oversight and management of neighborhood transportation studies, as well as citywide strategic planning, including DDOT's Long-Range Transportation Plan, MOVE DC. Throughout her career, Colleen has been responsible for the department and management of an array of diverse projects promoting sustainability, economic development, and enhanced quality of life. Darren Smith is the National Association of Realtors Policy Representative for Smart Growth and state and local issues. This includes responsibility for tracking and lobbying federal transportation policy, which Darren has followed professionally for more than a decade. He serves as NAR's representative on transportation-related advocacy coalitions, including the Transportation for America Coalition and the National Complete Streets Coalition. He also directs NAR's Land Use Initiative, which provides technical assistance to state and local realtor associations dealing with issues of land use, planning and regulation, and is NAR's liaison to government affairs staff for state and local realtor associations. Before coming to NAR, Darren worked as a transportation planner for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and the national headquarters of Rails to Trails Conservancy, a nonprofit organization that provides the preservation and conversion of unused rail corridors as multi-use trails. Darren holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning with a transportation planning focus from Virginia Tech and is a graduate of American University. He's a native of Lawrence, Kansas, and currently resides in the Shaw neighborhood of Washington, D.C. After Darren is Jeff Miller, who began as president and CEO of the Alliance for Biking and Walking in the spring of 2008. A bike advocate since 1990, Jeff previously served as executive director of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine for nearly 12 years, growing the organization into one of the strongest and most respected bicycle coalitions in North America. Jeff became an advocate while in college when he biked across the U.S. in 1990 and saw firsthand how biking could help address many of our society's challenges. 2 years later, he was awarded a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship to study and experience the bicycle infrastructure and policies in 15 countries, including Japan, China, New Zealand, Sri Lanka, and much of Europe. That 14-month around-the-world bike tour served as a significant part of his education in bicycle advocacy, policy, and infrastructure design. Jeff, who now lives in Washington, D.C., uses his bike year-round for transportation, enjoys touring, exploring, and competing in road races and triathlons. In addition to his experience running statewide coalition, Jeff has served as president for the local Friends of the Kennebec River Rail Trail, and Jeff also serves on the boards of America Walks, the Adventure Cycling Association, and America Bikes. And finally, last but not least, is Roger Millar. He's Vice President and Director of Smart Growth America's Leadership Institute and Director of the National Complete Streets Coalition. And Roger has held leadership positions in the public and private sectors, most recently as Director of the Missoula, Montana Office of Planning and Grants, and projects in which Roger played a leadership role, particularly the development of Portland, Oregon's Pearl District and Portland Streetcar, are seen as national models. He has also managed or participated in significant projects for rural, resort, and gateway communities throughout the American West. Roger is a fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers, a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, and a certified floodplain manager. He is a member of the ASCE Committee for America's Infrastructure, which produces the report card for America's Infrastructure. He is also past president of the Oregon section of the ASCE in the Montana Association of Planners, and he graduated from the University of Virginia in 1982. So you can see we have a terrific panel. So first let me call up Kyle to make some remarks, and we'll follow with all the remarks, and then we'll have a facilitated Q&A.
Well, on behalf of Mayor A.C. Wharton Jr., the Memphis City Council, and the entire city of Memphis, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting us here today to recognize Memphis's recently passed Complete Streets policy in celebration that it's the 500th effective policy passed in the country. Mayor Wharton sends his regrets that he is unable to make it today, but I thought that I would just sort of start our remarks with a quote that Mayor Wharton gave a few months ago when we passed the Complete Streets policy, and I think it sets the tone nicely for why Memphis decided to move in a Complete Streets direction and how we're sort of moving that forward in our city. He said, "Our streets move us, and not just from place to place. They also define life in our communities. Streets are shared spaces. They belong to everyone. But they no longer serve all those people well enough because the way that we move around our cities is changing. Biking, walking, and transit use are growing in popularity. Streets take you from point A to point B, but the street in and of itself is a destination. And if we can build complete streets, we're going to serve our residents better in all of our neighborhoods. Strong neighborhoods, strong communities make strong cities." And if you've been paying attention to news recently about Memphis, you might have noticed some really great positive press that's been coming out. Memphis is on the rise. Manufacturing giants like Electrolux and Mitsubishi have opened new manufacturing facilities, bringing thousands of jobs back to the Memphis area. Medical leaders like St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital recruits and retains thousands of highly skilled young employees working to cure childhood chronic diseases from across the nation. People are recognizing Memphis for the great tourism industry that we have. If you can come to Memphis on a budget and experience everything that we have, from barbecue to blues, for a little out of your pocket. And none of this is by accident. And Mayor Wharton's correct in asserting that the focus of rebuilding our cities in the U.S. And to compete on the national and global scale for jobs, residents, and bright young people begins by strengthening our neighborhoods and strengthening our streets. Our Complete Streets policy would not have been possible without the tireless work of community advocates working across Memphis to make our city better in a number of ways. Specifically, the Community Development Council of Memphis, their program Livable Memphis, and the local chapter of the Urban Land Institute back in 2012 led an initiative that brought more than 100 stakeholders from across the community together to talk about complete streets. There were city officials, there were city staff, utility administrators, neighborhood leaders, developers, realtors, bicycle and pedestrian advocates, transit providers, and all these people sat together through a multi-day workshop and began hashing out what Memphis thought it could be doing better in terms of providing a more robust street life in our city. While we officially adopted our Complete Streets policy in February of 2013, we've been working actually for quite a bit longer period of time towards making the goal of making our streets complete. For everybody, regardless of how they're going to get around, and we've been reaping some of those benefits already. Neighborhoods like Broad Avenue is a historic retail district in the central part of Memphis that was sort of a long neglected neighborhood after a highway bypass removed all automobile traffic from the roadway. They began to rethink about their neighborhood way back in 2006, hosting some design charrettes, planning for the future. In 2010, shortly after I started with the city granted the business owners their permission to go out into the street, paint bicycle lanes on the roadway, paint new crosswalks in, provide temporary planters, street furniture, to hold an event to help people realize what the street could look like if reenacted and reimagined in a different way. Since that event, Broad Avenue has seen 25 new businesses open, more than $10 million in private reinvestment into the building structures and facades, and it's now one of the busiest, most vibrant commercial and retail and nightlife areas in the city of Memphis. And we haven't even actually built anything. To that point, though, the city has committed and secured the funding to make those temporary structures, those temporary markings on the ground, a permanent fixture for the neighborhood. Residents like Jeff Becusen are getting out on their bikes for the first time in decades. Motivated by a growing network of bicycle lanes and trails throughout the city, Jeff picked up a bicycle from a local bike shop and after 6 months had lost 50 pounds. He says, enabled by the street networks contained with infrastructure that provides safe and efficient travel for him to ride his bicycle. Other residents are getting on their bikes too. Bicycling is up 400% in Memphis since 2011, and we expect that number to continue to grow. Earlier this year, Mayor Wharton committed to building 15 miles of protected bicycle lanes in the city over the next 18 to 24 months. We're hoping that these protected bicycle lanes, spaces where the bicycle lanes are separated from moving motor vehicle traffic by some sort of physical barrier, will lead to more exponential increases in the number of people choosing to bicycle every single day. A lot of our great companies are realizing and recognizing that the marketplace for new college graduates entering the workforce is different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. No longer are really great compensation packages, benefits packages, or work environments enough to lure the brightest and the best new employees to companies. As important as the environment in which an employee will work at a company is now, the city in which that company is located is as important for them. In Memphis, the law firm of Bass, Berry & Sims are using the changes in Memphis's public streets as a tool to recruit some of the best Ivy League law school graduates in the nation, hoping that they'll move to Memphis to begin their careers and their families with us in the Bluff City. Just so no one's confused, complete streets for us doesn't mean expensive streets. Like most U.S. cities, Memphis is operating on a fairly limited budget. We've realized the mistakes over the past, where we've literally expanded and overreached our ability to serve both geographically and philosophically to an area more than what we encompass today. We're finding it to be a struggle, and so implementing complete streets for the city of Memphis has been a work of innovation, a work of patience, and what we're finding is that complete streets for us is more of a mindset, that through incremental changes over time, we can begin to redefine the public space in which all residents engage. To this end, we've been able to install more than 50 miles of new bike lanes in the city over a 24-month span, all of those without a single line item in our local budget to make that happen. We've been looking at ongoing maintenance and operations activities, those things that are already occurring, like repaving the roadways, sewer work, other public works projects, where we might have crews out there that are already striping the roadway, and we're saying, hey, can you make one more pass of the road to add a bicycle lane? These unique, innovative approaches make complete streets not only affordable for us, but also sustainable in the future. And sustainability is really our focus for the next step of our complete streets evolution. We're working now to create a complete streets design manual that'll further establish the policies that will enact processes that allow our city officials, our city staff to instinctively think about complete streets in all of the decision making that occurs within the city. I hope that many of you will be able to come visit Memphis in the near future. I'd be remiss to not inform you that this is actually Elvis Week in Memphis. I wanted to assure you all that Elvis is alive and well, because just yesterday I saw him riding a bicycle down the street. Thank you.
Congratulations to Memphis on that. Art Guzzetti, APTA's Vice President for Policy. APTA is proud to host this meeting in our offices, host this webcast. We're fortunate to stand shoulder to shoulder with such effective partners, all of whom see transportation in its holistic context. And we're proud that APTA's Director of Policy, Planning, and Sustainability, Rich Weaver, serves as chair of this coalition. Today, August 14th, 36 million boardings on public transportation around the country. More face-to-face customers than any other business. Name another one that has that many face-to-face customers every day, and trends all pointing favorably towards public transportation growth. The needle continues to move that way. People voting with their feet, ridership up on an 18-year trend that more than doubled the rate of population growth, significantly above vehicle miles traveled over that period. Elections last year, 62 times around the country, where the communities were asked, do you want more public transportation investments in your community, and are you willing to support those through additional revenues, additional taxes, asking the public directly. 49 out of 62 times the answer came back yes. Yes. What could be more reflective of the public sentiment than that? In real estate, this affects everyone here. The property in proximity to public transportation is and complete streets, and certainly that goes to communities with travel options, is valued by the property owners at a high level. So they're putting a value on what we have to mention here. Thanks to everyone for joining today. As Rich mentioned, APTA has been part of this movement since its early days. And to achieve that, we know that people need to get to their bus stops and train stations. That's a key place of why we care about Complete Streets and are a part of this partnerships. It helps solve the last mile challenge of getting people to and from public transportation. Nearly every transit stop begins as a walking trip. But the sometimes disconnect between transit and road planning means that transit riders are often left to wait at bus stops marked by a lone post in the grass, no sidewalk, no curb, no ramp or bench. In too many communities, it is difficult and even dangerous for anyone to walk or bike to public transportation, especially for those persons with disabilities or for older adults. Poor street design also discourages many people from taking public transportation itself. A study in Houston, Texas found that 3 out of 5 older adults and persons with disabilities didn't have sidewalks between their home and the nearest bus stop. Fewer than 10% of those groups used public transportation, even though 50% lived within 2-block distance of the bus stop. Also key, the Complete Streets consider the needs of transit vehicles in street planning, design, and operation. Buses especially face challenges in conveniently designed streets where they get stuck in traffic and drivers have to constantly merge in and out to pick up and drop off passengers. While there are ways to make bus travel more efficient, transit agencies were rarely at the table when streets were built or redesigned. With Complete Streets, more communities are realizing the full potential of public transportation. By prioritizing the needs of transit vehicles and riders, more people see taking the bus or train as a viable option, giving them the opportunity to text, to take a nap, to check email, to have travel options available to them when communities are designed the right way. A growing number of cities are relocating some travel lanes to bus-only lanes and creating express bus lanes and bus BRT systems. BRT is reliant on the right kind of street design and operation, also accomplished through the Complete Streets on that. So a few additional examples. In just 3 years, ridership in Cleveland's Health Line BRT system ridership increased more than 60% over the bus routes that formerly ran along the corridor. Passengers have reported average time savings of 12 minutes. Average speeds running along the corridor have increased 34% over previous service. This is just by designing things in a better way. The BRT and associated street improvements have helped to inspire more private development along the corridor. Over $4.3 billion has been invested or pledged when the Health Line first opened in October 2008. Ridership has more than doubled since then, with an estimated 17,000 riders daily. In its first year of bus service, Rapid Bus in Los Angeles, using signal priority systems to extend green lights, shorten red lights for buses, travel time decreased by 25%, ridership increased by 30%. In Nevada, we're seeing ridership up 5% each year just by designing the streets better to accommodate the flow of people, not just vehicles. What a return on investment. And Complete Streets has caught up in other countries working along this same line. Santiago, Chile a major reform to its bus network is hampered by poor street design, as a lack of median stations and fully dedicated bus lanes. Chilean leaders are now employing the complete streets approach. So here we have it. We're improving access to transit, saves money for riders and agencies. We're finding that if you have the travel option available to you and it's convenient to you, if your household can get by with 2 cars instead of 3 or 1 car instead of 2, or if you can have that much less investment in the personal automobile, sure, you need one. It's the foundation of our system. Usually you need one, but if you can get by because of good transit and good street design with less, you can save $10,000 a year per household. Finally, I'm just going to touch on the equity aspect. Low-income Americans are more likely to take transit, and good convenient transit helps their cause. It's a health issue. Easy access to transit can increase the rates of healthy physical activity. Over 1/3 of transit users meet the Surgeon General's recommendations for minimum daily exercise. I have more to say, but I'll weave it into our discussion. Thank you all for your time and attention.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me today. My name is Colleen Hawkinson, and I'm representing the District of Columbia Department of Transportation. So Complete Streets, our official policy was signed as a director's order in 2010. But I think more than telling you what is in that policy and speaking to the different elements, which I will, it's easier to just tell you to go out to Sherman Street Northwest up in Columbia Heights and to come downtown and check out our East Street Road Diet. Look at the 11th Street Bridge that was just completed with overlooks, bike lanes, and large pedestrian sidewalks. You tend to come across a complete street and see it. You know a difference from what's typically out there. So within the planning context, DDOT's mission is to maintain a cohesive, sustainable transportation system for all users to move people and goods in a safe, affordable, and convenient way. DDOT has a number of really progressive, strong plans. We did the bike master plan. We have a pedestrian master plan. The design and engineering manual was redone in 2009 to incorporate the specifications that came out of the bike and pedestrian master plan. That proved connectivity from the planning group to the construction group. As I said, we formalized our Complete Streets policy in 2010. But what was happening was all of these different plans were done in silos, and they weren't necessarily collaborating with one another. So as we go from 2010 to now, and we're doing our strategic long-range plan, which is our 30-year vision plan. Why are we doing it? Because it's federally mandated. But we're going above and beyond the federal requirements to meet the needs that DC will have in terms of population and density growth within the next 30 years, as well as all the changes that are going on. So essentially, all the different plans that we currently have will be updated, and they will be updated to collaborate with each other. One of the big things from our Complete Streets policy said that at times a certain corridor may be prioritized for one specific mode. Well, that's great, but when all the modes were planned independently, most of those studies had preferences for the exact same corridor. So you will see New York Avenue is a popular corridor for streetcar, for bike, for pedestrian. So what Move DC is going to do is look at the system overall, incorporate the Complete Streets policy that was developed in 2010, and really take a look on how we can move forward with that. DC has seen tremendous population growth. In the last 2 years, we've grown by 30,000 residents. That's 1,100 residents per month. And we see forecasting out a few years that is going to be maintained. Right now, DC has a bike mode share of 3.3%. For some neighborhoods, that goes up to 14%. In the district, 33% of our residents drive to work. In the Washington metropolitan region, that's double at 66%. One of the other plans that was just completed was the Mayor's Sustainability Plan. And Move DC will give active ways to implement the goals that have been set out in the sustainability plan. And our goals are pretty far-reaching, but we think with the Complete Streets policy, we'll be able to achieve them. We hope to reach 50% transit commuter trips and 25% bike and walk trips. So that leaves 25% trips being taken by vehicle or taxi. That's pretty substantial, and that's what we are finding the ways now through Move DC to specifically state out how we will get there. One of the things that we've learned from the Complete Streets as we've moved through it, the test was always level of service, and we're finding that maybe level of service isn't the best way to measure if an area is good or bad for a bicycle or pedestrian or someone in a wheelchair. So we're looking to possibly do the stress test analysis. We've been working with the Green Streets Project and getting some input from them. And I think that's what this Move DC is all about. It's about looking at our complete street policy, making it holistic, tweaking it where it needs to be tweaked to make sure that it has legs to stand on as we move forward, and also to make sure that it's open in the future to new technologies. I think one of the biggest things is the unknown. 5 years ago in DC, there was hardly any car sharing. Bike sharing Smart Bike, which was our first iteration of bike sharing, had just begun and failed. And so bike sharing was just coming on. And I think what we learned from that is we cannot underestimate what technologies may be available in the future that will continue to encourage different modes of getting from one place to another. So that's something that we have to keep in mind and create a plan that's flexible enough for the unknown, but it's something we can count on things being there that are not there today, and we can also count on not knowing what those things are. So that's a pretty big challenge. But overall, we've seen a lot of success in the Complete Streets policy. And as I said, the best way to look into it is just to go out. Our whole Great Streets program, H Street Northeast, was one of the projects in that program, and that will be our first streetcar street, which should be getting ready at the end of this calendar year to be in operation. So that will be a huge thing for the District of Columbia. And I have other information, but I'll wait for questions. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me to contribute to this discussion, and thank you all for being here in support of Complete Streets. It's great to see all of you. Again, I'm Darren Smith with the National Association of Realtors. I'm personally very proud to be a part of the Complete Streets movement, and NAR is proud to have been a founding benefactor of the National Complete Streets Coalition. And it's interesting the varied reactions that I get when I represent NAR at Complete Streets engagements, both on Capitol Hill and elsewhere, or tell people about NAR's involvement in Complete Streets. Some people just look confused. Others, like at one meeting with a congressional staff person a couple weeks ago, say, "Oh, you don't need to explain it to me. I totally get it. I understand." It really is pretty simple. Realtors see themselves as selling the American dream. They understand, at least many of them do, that means they are selling both a structure and a location, a neighborhood, a community. They don't want to sell an incomplete American dream or an American dream with caveats. In other words, not a dream house in a so-so neighborhood, or one that will end up causing difficulties for the owners as time goes on, maybe because of a long and costly commute. So they want to transact in neighborhoods where people actually want to live. It's tougher for people to take the risk of buying a house if they're not sure that both the house and the neighborhood are exactly what they're looking for. And the same goes for commercial landowners as well, and the commercial realtors who work with them. Now, it's true that people's taste in neighborhoods varies widely, but we do know that more and more people are saying that they want to live in a neighborhood that presents multiple, safe, and useful transportation options, including transit, bicycling, and walking. And we know that many people see their own neighborhood as lacking in that characteristic, and they see neighborhoods that do offer that characteristic as scarce or prohibitively expensive for them. We know that simply because of the way these places have held their value during the recent recession, and we know it from the periodic community preference survey that NAR conducts, which tells us that 77% of Americans say that the presence of sidewalks and pedestrian infrastructure is very important or somewhat important to them when deciding where they want to live. 38% say it should be a high priority of government to provide convenient alternatives to driving, such as walking, biking, and public transportation. Around 50% say that their current neighborhood is lacking when it comes to places to bike and walk, and walkable destinations. So what do we do about this demand and supply mismatch? For NAR, that means promoting investment in the kind of community transportation infrastructure that leads to more neighborhoods where people want to live and work. It also means working to make the idea of completing the streets so second nature to the country's transportation planners and engineers that considering all modes and users becomes an automatic thing. Right now it's not, at least not everywhere. And it's important to note that the desire for walkable neighborhoods with good transportation options isn't just limited to those sort of stereotypical parts of the country where people expect it. The urban areas on the coasts, the college towns, the sort of hippie artistic communities. It's present too in the middle of the country, the suburbs, the small towns in rural America, where people sense that something's missing from their quality of life, from their community fabric, and they're realizing that that has something to do with their transportation options. Memphis, as you heard about, is a great example where planners and community activists, as well as representatives of the business community, have come together to enact and implement a complete streets policy. NAR was happy to support, through one of our Smart Growth grants, the involvement of the Memphis Area Association of Realtors in that coalition. I've been fortunate to be able to assist the National Complete Streets Coalition with its federal advocacy efforts. And I often hear these two things from skeptics. Sometimes it's explicitly stated, and sometimes it's just kind of implicit in their comments. And those two things are, well, if we have 500 policies nationwide, then we obviously don't really need a federal policy. And I also hear, I'm fine with cyclists, pedestrians, transit users having their own infrastructure, but they should have to pay for it themselves. It should be something that they do and figure out and do on their own. And I think in different ways, these statements both reflect a lack of understanding of how roads in this country actually get built and maintained, and a false concept of there being clear divisions between different users of transportation infrastructure. I've already talked about how the desire for complete streets is not limited to certain kinds of communities. Important too is the recognition that at some point everyone's a pedestrian, and that providing infrastructure for, quote, alternative modes benefits everyone. It spurs economic development, and through proper design, it can actually improve congestion conditions for drivers and actually save taxpayers money. The reality is that we don't have completely separate infrastructure systems for different modes. For the most part, we're all sharing the same corridors, the same rights of way. Even in places with separate multi-use paths, those paths still intersect with the street network and rely upon segments of it to connect to key destinations. Without it being a default procedure to consider all modes and users, roads get constructed and reconstructed without key features that ensure the safety and mobility of cyclists, pedestrians, and other users. Federal design standards, regulatory constraints, and dollars permeate through the system, even so-called local roads. There aren't that many places that have the money and the capacity to implement their own design standards and complete streets infrastructure. You heard about one of them just now in DC. Everyone else is largely dependent on state DOTs, which in turn look to national standards and are often constrained by federal rules. If Congress and the U.S. Department of Transportation are going to say that the federal program's #1 priority is safety, and if we want maximum cost efficiency for our transportation dollar, then a complete streets policy has to be present. And that goes for every state and local transportation planning and implementing agency. We've got 500 on board, and for that we should be very pleased and proud. We still have a long way to go.
Hi, I'm Jeff Miller with the Alliance for Biking and Walking, and I'll keep my remarks pretty brief so we can get to questions and so forth. And there's already been so many good things and local stories that have been shared already. But real quick, the Alliance is a coalition of over 200 state and local bicycle and pedestrian advocacy organizations all across North America, and we've been pushing for complete streets before it was complete streets. And that's one of the beauties. I'll touch on that in a second. For years, we've been rallying about routine accommodation. That's just so not as sexy as complete streets. And it's obviously in the best interest of bicycle and pedestrian advocates. It really makes the whole built environment discussion so much easier for anybody to understand. And it's a great tool for us also to engage our partners in transit, in the disability community, in communities that are underserved. There's a lot to be done, and alliance organizations are also a fantastic asset because they do have the partnerships, they do have the relationships, they do have the connections on the ground to really get things rolling, and not only to get complete streets policies passed, but to help get them implemented, enacted, and enforced, and to really serve that watchdog role. The Alliance is, I'll also mention a couple other ways. We work very closely with the League of American Bicyclists and the Advocacy Advanced Partnership, and we've got a lot of resources there, and have been helpful in getting a lot of complete streets policies implemented and funded. The Alliance also publishes the benchmarking report, which I conveniently left on the table, but we've been helping with the National Complete Streets Coalition highlight the progress, and I'm really glad to see that upward trajectory, and now with our 500th policy. And we also have worked with partners like the Centers for Disease Control, AARP, and others on that. I want to just share a few quick examples, and I think a couple of the less usual suspects. Tulsa, Oklahoma, where local advocates have worked on a Fix Our Streets campaign and have been able to address a rather overwhelming issue. Tulsa, for those who don't know, has more landmass than San Francisco, Boston, DC, and Miami combined. And if you were to straighten all its streets, you could go from New York to Los Angeles and still have 500 miles further to go into the Pacific. So a complete streets policy there is going to take a while to fully implement. But what an important opportunity as the city starts to rebuild its streets. And was at risk of rebuilding its streets as it had 40 and 50 years ago. In New Orleans, where they got the new policy passed, they were also able to leverage things like the Super Bowl coming to town and some of the improvements that the city wanted to make to not only get improved crosswalks, islands in the roadway, bike lanes, sharrows, and so forth. Lee County, Florida, where Bike Walk Lee has been able to use their complete streets policy and really do their own benchmarking efforts locally. And of course, one of our favorite success stories in Georgia, where the Georgia DOT thought they had a policy, and it was only about a little over a year ago when Georgia Bikes was hosting their annual legislative ride and rallying people and complete our streets, and the chief engineer of DOT was there and went up to the leader of Georgia Bikes and said to Brent, he's like, why, I didn't appreciate you chanting that. We already have a complete streets policy. No, you don't. Yes, you do. No, you don't. And indeed went back and found out that he didn't have a policy. So this year, the bicyclists were chanting, thanks DOT, because not only did they pass a great complete streets policy, it's the first complete streets policy where the new NACDO Urban Bikeway Design Guide was adopted. So a lot of good things happening there. I think that one of the greatest successes of complete streets is really already, not in the 500 policies alone, but in really reframing the discussion. You know, it really has shifted it to streets are not complete until they do accommodate pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, and people with various and different abilities. So it really has become the new standard. And 500 policies, I'd say, is fabulous. It's a great start. We're not done yet. And we're not done yet for a number of reasons. We still have over 20 states that don't have complete streets policies. There are many communities across the country that still need policies. But the real challenge we also face is in the implementation that's ahead of us. And linking, you know, just like a bicycle and pedestrian plan that can collect dust, we have to breathe life into it. All of our peers and partners, you know, we need to really enact and implement. And DC, I think, is really a fantastic example, and one I relate to very personally, living here and talking with people all around the country when I travel about the changes that people see when they get to visit. You know, I mean, we've got really attractive things like bike share and a fantastic metro system and the circulator buses, and those are the sort of glitzy things that people see. But it goes much deeper than that, and it is so much easier to get around, and it is attracting so many wonderful people from across the country and the world. DC's growing at 1,100 people per month. And having that complete streets policy is also going to be key, as you heard, in helping us all move around. And that's really what it's all about, is that better life that we all want. That we want to have better community where we can all roll and stroll with our family, our friends, our neighbors, and get to know our neighbors. So let's go forward. Let's kick the next 500 policies out in a few weeks or months, and let's get these policies really implemented. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Roger Millar. I'm Vice President of Smart Growth America. To us at Smart Growth America, Smart Growth is about strategies that provide housing and transportation choice near jobs, shopping, and schools for American communities, be they urban or suburban or rural in nature. And those strategies, they're designed to support thriving local economies and protect the environment. And that's why we're really proud to house the National Complete Streets Coalition as a program of Smart Growth America. And we're everywhere. We are in Portland, Oregon, and Portland, Maine. We're in Deerfield Beach, Florida. We're in Southern Nevada, where the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada adopted a complete streets policy this year. We're in the town that I live and work and play in, Billings, Montana, which adopted a complete streets policy back in 2011. So the movement is everywhere, and it's growing, and we encourage you to be a part of it if you're not already. It's great to see our coalition partners here today. The strength of the coalition is its breadth, its diversity. You know, I've been involved with Complete Streets for about a year, but I think a lot of what we do is due to the hard work of Barbara McCann, the first executive director of the National Complete Streets Coalition. And if you're interested in looking at the history, I'd encourage you to check out the book that she's going to be releasing in the very near future. Also Stephanie Seskin, our deputy director, who's been at this for years and really makes the thing go. What I'd like to do is start some questions for the panel, and we would encourage everyone who's watching the live webcast to send questions via the hashtag 500policies, and we'll do our best to answer them. So I'm going to start out with one for the panel. With 500 policies passed, complete streets policies are almost a new normal in the transportation community. So what's needed next to ensure robust implementation of complete streets? Who'd like to start with that?
Well, I'll touch on it. I mean, I think it is going to take some diligence and perseverance and really watchdogging and reminding. I mean, it's the new normal. It's the standard now. But it is going to take reminding officials who are used to doing things the way they've been doing them for far too long to say, we need to remind you, we have a new complete streets policy, and to really sort of talk about how to implement that. You know, one of the things I didn't share in Georgia is, you know, with that brand new complete streets policy, Roswell was looking to do, you know, the only bridge crossing in town, And lo and behold, it didn't include any bike lanes. And so they met with the Georgia DOT, and the Georgia DOT came back right away with new drawings, like, oh, you know, sort of like a little bit of egg on their face. But you know, the mayor of Roswell and the local advocates talking about the whole, you know, sort of the whole new attitude at Georgia DOT. So I think it is going to take partnership and persistence.
Darren?
I'll add a little bit to that. For one, just to praise the work that the Complete Streets Coalition has done and the staff has done to really talk about what makes for a good Complete Streets policy and what makes for successful implementation of a Complete Streets policy. And I think that work, a lot of that's just been done recently, and I think getting that out there to help communities will go a long ways towards getting more policies and more effective policies.
Great. Art, you have something to add to that? We'll go down the table.
I just have a quick one, and I would say to let it be a living, breathing policy, and as different technology situations and best practices develop, is to look into incorporating them so that it keeps up with the times.
And from my point of view, two answers. One is the market's heading that way. You know, folks respond to markets and public attitudes, and I think the attitude is already heading this way, so we just have to follow the market. That's point one. Second, there are some, you know, there are qualitative reasons why this stuff makes sense. There are quantitative reasons. A couple things I did mention in my remarks was, if you live in a community that's walkable and the street network facilitates that mobility, typically, you know, 16 fewer miles per day traveled. You know, in Wisconsin, we know that public transportation riders save $7 per trip over driving. So there's a quantitative reason for that. Also, if you have a street network that facilitates access to the public transport system, and I know I'm talking about transport, but this is holistic and it goes all ways. You know, a paratransit trip is hard to provide, but if you can access the local transit system through a street network that just provides that easy connectivity, the paratransit trip can cost $38,000 a year over the year. But you know, some basic improvements to the transit stop would cost as little as $7,000. So we can do the math on those kind of things, why from a public policymaker's point of view, this stuff makes all the sense.
That's a great, Kyle, I had a question for you. You know, you've recently adopted a policy in your city. What resonated the most in your community? Was it the safety aspects of it, the economics? What resonated with the decision makers and the people that demanded the policy be adopted?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of pieces to that. Mayor Wharton has a large health initiative, so he's very keen on getting people moving in our city every single day. He's a fit young man himself, exercises every day, and so he recognizes that there is a link between people being able to walk or bicycle in their neighborhood and their physical health. But that ultimately ties into sort of the city's ability to be economically competitive in this national and global marketplace. If 60% of our adult workforce population is considered obese right now, and so when the mayor is trying to recruit new businesses to move to Memphis, telling potential manufacturers that 60% of your workforce might be taking additional days off of work, they might be sick more often, your healthcare costs are going to be higher. There's a direct correlation between people's health and our ability as a city to attract new businesses to move here. And then sort of last is ultimately the city of Memphis and other cities across the country simply can't afford to continue to do the same things that we've done for the last 50 or 60 years in terms of how we've built our city. In Memphis, we were able to map property values for all the parcels in the city of Memphis. We were able to look at where we were investing our capital dollars. And what we found is that in years past, our capital expenditures have been in areas where the property values have been underperforming compared to the rest of the city. In those areas of the city that were performing at the city average or above in terms of their value and worth over time, were those areas and those neighborhoods that were robust in their sidewalk networks, robust in their ability, their density for people to move around the neighborhoods efficiently while they're leaving their cars at home. So there's a recognition that what we've done in the past isn't working, and we've got to make sure to change it for the future.
Thanks. Colleen, is it the same or different issues in DC, or the same stuff come up as you were adopting the policy?
I would say a lot of it is similar. Some differences, maybe some things that we encounter would be when you're talking about balancing all the different modes for a particular corridor. I think a lot of people get very excited that their mode is going to finally be represented there, but maybe it's not going to be represented as much as they had hoped, like a protected cycle track, as well as a bus lane, as well as on the other side of the street, a widened sidewalk. So I think that there has to be the realization that we're talking about every mode. And there are a lot of modes that need more of a boost than the vehicular mode at this point. We need to get more bikers out there and feeling more comfortable with their environment and more pedestrians. But it can't be to the detriment of freight coming into the city and delivering your UPS package at your front door and things like that. It's every single mode needs the other mode, and I think sometimes the reality of that surprises people and may not be what they expect.
Great, thanks. Darren, a question for you. We've got people watching the live stream from all over the country. How can advocates around the country engage with their local realtors on the topic of complete streets? What would you recommend?
Sure. Well, there are a couple different ways to go about that. One is just really to contact the local realtor association. NAR is a sort of distributed organization. The state and local realtor associations are independent and can have their own policies and act independently. Many of them sort of are already bought into the idea of complete streets. Many are not. But regardless, just initiating that contact can be good. And we at the National Association and our Smart Growth program can help facilitate that connection. We also have programs that encourage local realtor associations to get involved with complete streets initiatives, including things like the grant that encouraged the Memphis, that allowed the Memphis Association to participate in that coalition. So. Yeah, it's you can either kind of go bottom up or top down.
Okay, great, that's good information. And we're going to open up for a few audience questions here in a minute, so if you think of one, there'll be a microphone circulating around, and if you're watching the live stream, hashtag 500policies. Jeff, a question for you. Your organization's been advancing complete streets around the country for years now. Have you found support in unexpected places? What are some of the members of this movement that people wouldn't expect?
Well, I think that there's been several partners that I highlighted earlier that are key, and actually I was going to build on Darren's piece and just highlight that realtors are a fantastic example because and an unusual one for a lot of bicycle and pedestrian advocates. And they're fantastic because they're the ones who are, in many cases, literally rebuilding the city storefront or a block at a time, or in some cases, multiple blocks. And we know that sometimes it's those incremental pieces just to get the things rolling along in the right direction. But I'd say that really it's the opportunity for local advocates to think very creatively of all the different partners. Sorry, I don't have any better examples, but there's everyone in the community benefits, and that's really the opportunity that advocates have.
That's a great point. It's that complete streets, it's about the safety and convenience and quality of life for people, whether they're driving or riding a bike or walking or taking transit and what have you. And we are increasingly becoming about outcomes. The organization spent a lot of time working on getting policies adopted. We're going to continue to work on that, but we're interested in outcomes. And one of the questions that came in over the live stream is, what have been the outcomes of complete streets policies beyond just new street designs? What are you seeing, on the ground that's changing in American communities? Art, you mentioned some transit things. Are you seeing a difference with complete streets policies in place?
Well, one thing I would say, certainly in concept and attitude would be first, but I'd also like to say we all need to practice what we preach, and as the transit systems around the country that own a lot of facilities. We have stations. We have, of course, bus routes. We have to work in partnership too, and we're trying to do that. There's, of course, every community has its own set of relationships, but we should make our rail stations with bike access, with with bike racks. We should have policies that, you know, facilitate and allow and work out ways that you can, you know, put your bus on the, your bike on the bus, or take it on the rail vehicle, those kinds of things. Those have to be worked out place by place, but I think that's part of the same attitude that's permeated Complete Streets. Well, can that extend to the transit network? Sure it can. We need to figure out the last mile to and from the station.
Great. Colleen, outcomes?
One of the biggest outcomes for us, I would say, is economic development. And this is an example of a project here. It was actually before our Complete Streets policy was signed, but it's 8th Street Barracks Row in Southeast. Between 1999 and 2006, 2005 was when the implementation was done, sales and rental quadrupled. There were 43 new businesses, 52 facades restored, and 200 new jobs. And I think it's important also to note that we worked with the existing businesses. So not all the existing businesses left or got priced out, but they simply changed there's a Chinese restaurant that just removed the bulletproof glass and put some tablecloths on the table. And we walked through them with different partnerships from the mayor's office with economic development, and found ways for people to stay, more people to come in. So economic development was a big one.
Great.
I'll just add that obviously one of the other outcomes we're seeing is the mode share changes. You know, we are seeing increasing levels of transit use, walking and bicycling. And you know, to your point, Roger, I mean, I can think of only one group who don't benefit from Complete Streets, and that's people who really like sitting in traffic jams. And you know, I don't know if there are many people who really like that. I mean, really what we're talking about is literally a better quality of life, getting our streets to be more functional, and where people have mobility options. They have that freedom to get from A to B in the most efficient, affordable, or fun way that they want.
That's a good point. And Colleen, you brought up an issue that we hear about a lot, and that's equity. And you know, how do you address the topic of equity in your Complete Streets work, and how would you like to see equity included in Complete Streets? I know that's an issue in Memphis, it's an issue all over the country. Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
Sure, I'll speak to it.
Great.
You know, so one of the things that we've been really proud of in the city of Memphis is that as we've been building new bicycle lanes, for instance, is that we're building bicycle lanes not exclusively sort of in neighborhoods that might accept them for people who are already bicycling, but we're providing bicycle access across the city. And I think an important piece of rolling out your Complete Streets policy, and I think Art mentioned it, is about better integrating the modes of transportation that currently exist so they can connect to one another. And so a big piece in Memphis, a report by the Brookings Institute noted that only 26% of the jobs in Memphis were directly accessible by transit. And some of that is, you know, some of that has to do with transit funding overall and how we provide more service with reducing the amount of funding. And well, the answer to that could be, it is, you know, extending the reach of transit through better bicycle facilities, better pedestrian facilities, at a fraction of the cost of what it might take to operate a whole nother transit line to reach those places of employment. And so, as we are rolling out, we're looking for additional opportunities to better link the people that are living in Memphis with the places that they need to go, where they want to go, whether they're working, provide them additional opportunities, and we're doing so on a grand scale in the city of Memphis. And so sometimes it feels like the things that we are doing is sort of a drop in the bucket. Memphis is about 350 square miles is our geographic size, and so 50 miles of bike lanes on a city that size isn't really a whole lot. But we're doing we're very strategically doing it in such a way that all neighborhoods across the city of Memphis are getting new access and new amenities.
Great. Do you want to add anything to that? Are there questions out in the audience? I've seen a couple of hands up. There's one here in the front. Just a second, we'll get the microphone.
Sure, I'm Tanya Snyder with Streets Blog. Just had a question about the idea of a federal policy in addition to all of the community and state policies. First of all, my understanding is that a federal policy would just mandate that every community have their own policies, so it's not that a federal policy would take the place of these community policies, but mandate that there be more of them, actually. I guess if you can talk a little bit, I think, Darren, you mentioned the fact that there is a need for a federal policy. Anthony Fox, when he became transportation secretary, kind of indicated, well, you know, maybe every community needs to do their own thing on this. Seemed to kind of step away a little bit from the idea of a federal mandate for that. I guess what would your response be to the new secretary about that? And maybe this is the third piece of it, but what would be the proper place for a federal policy to come in? Would that be in the next transportation bill, or kind of a standalone bill, or where?
I'll try to address that first, and others feel free to chime in. You're correct in that a federal complete streets policy would allow for existing complete streets policies that states and localities have adopted to remain in place, as long as they sort of meet a minimum standard of what is acceptable by the federal DOT. That's the way that the language is sort of currently proposed. There are all kinds of different ways in which a complete streets policy, it doesn't necessarily create really expensive mandates for implementing agencies to build facilities if there's not going to be demand for a facility or if it's otherwise prohibitive. So it's the way it's proposed is very flexible. I feel strongly that there would be a benefit to a federal complete streets policy, even as we've seen state and local policies propagate around the country. And I think, to me, it just comes down to the amount of money that the federal government spends on transportation, and that we want that money to be used as efficiently as possible, and we want the facilities that are built with that money to be as safe as they possibly can be for all users. And a complete streets policy is a great way to accomplish that, because it gets everybody on the same page and thinking about all modes, all users. And it just makes it part of the culture of transportation planning and engineering at a national level without imposing really costly mandates on the implementing agencies around the country. What was your third?
Whether that would be part of a federal transportation.
Oh, yeah. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. I think our hope is that it could be included in the next transportation authorization, but there are a lot of different ways in which federal complete streets policy could be implemented. That's just one.
Yeah, there is a bipartisan complete streets bill in the House today, and we're hoping that'll advance either on its own or is incorporated into a transportation bill. I found that, working with the industry, when I worked with, the development community wants certainty, and they don't want things to bounce around all over the place depending on where they're at. When you look at all of the money that goes to the states from the federal government with transportation, and you have cities that have complete streets policies and counties that have complete streets policies, but maybe there's no policy at the state level, some federal guidance would help to level the playing field and give people in the industry and people who advocate and people who pay taxes around this country a minimum platform and some certainty and some understanding that that's the way things are now and should be. We're seeing it come up from the bottom through our coalition and the policies that have been adopted. Having a policy on top would be a great piece of making all of this work on the ground for Americans.
Just a quick add, certainly I'd like to praise streets. The planning should be all modes, all people. That should be intrinsic into projects. I'd also like to say it's not just the complete streets, it's bill itself. It would be permeating into other policies beyond that. For example, of course, the New Starts program at the Federal Transit Administration. At one time it was based on travel time savings and cost per new rider and things like that, but more recently the criteria has been more holistic, and it's the ability of projects to shape a community and the ability of projects to create that vitality and economic development around stations. So that's just another example how the complete streets idea could permeate into a wide range of policies.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions out there? There's one in the back. I'll wait for the microphone here just a second.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tamika Montreville with the Federal Transit Administration. I actually worked with Roger and Colleen in my past life with WMATA in the district. My question also concerns equity, and I'm glad you brought it up. I lived in Orange Mound in Memphis, Tennessee And as a planner, I'm cognizant of my perceptions of what a complete street is in my community. And one of my concerns is how are communities that are underserved or not on the jurisdiction's radar as far as economic development, how are their complete streets needs met, and where along that participation process is complete streets? Are you all working to become a part of the metropolitan planning process and the public involvement plan? Because I think that would be a good way to ensure that complete streets are discussed at the metropolitan level.
That's a great statement and question. Kyle, what are you guys doing regionally on equity in the Memphis area?
So the city of Memphis represents sort of the largest entity in our metropolitan region, but the entire metro region is about double the size of population than just the city of Memphis itself. And it incorporates actually 3 different states, Mississippi, Arkansas included, as well as Tennessee. And so there are a lot of challenges with coordinating efforts across a tri-state region with a number of jurisdictions that I'd be more apt to sort of speak to the Tennessee side of things. There's a good bit more cooperation amongst the Tennessee jurisdictions in our area, and it's one of these things that I think it speaks true to sort of as Memphis itself sets the standard in many ways for how other jurisdictions in Tennessee are going to be approaching things. And so over the last couple of years, as Memphis has taken a lead on bicycle initiatives, for instance, many of our suburban communities have also begun to ramp up their efforts. And so in terms of public process and participation, the city of Memphis has recently undergone sort of a review of our public input process for these particular projects. And we've produced and made and are implementing right now sort of the first stages of this new public process that provides a very clear decision-making matrix and how we go about involving the public. And so one of the things that we're really proud of is that all of the bicycle facilities that we've put in, 100% of them are generated. The ideas for where we're going to be putting the next facility, and 100% of those are generated through user feedback. The federal funding that we're going after, that we're seeking using our local STP and our local Transportation Alternatives Fund, all of those projects are community sourced. And so when we're going, so for instance, we're in a competition right now for transportation alternatives funding at the local level. When the city of Memphis decided which projects it was going to submit for consideration for those projects, we turned to all of our community partners. And so we have a very robust base of community development agencies, neighborhood associations, and they provide feedback to us on sort of what the needs are in their community. And from that list is what we're developing our request off of for future capital funding. And so it's sort of this thing where the city of Memphis itself and the officials there and the staff that work with me, we're not necessarily choosing the projects. We're reacting to projects that are being submitted to us and helping to move those forward. And I think that's what's really helped us provide this sort of balanced implementation throughout the city that we've seen thus far.
That's great, and you also brought up another reason why a federal act might be a good thing, and that's those multi-state regional economies and nurturing those multi-state regional economies through complete streets policies, among other things. Jeff, you have
Roger, I
something?
wanted to add on the equity piece, which I think that reaching out to underserved communities are where we can often get the best bang for the buck with complete streets, because often that's where we'll also see the greatest outcomes and safety improvements. And I want to highlight that advocacyadvance.org has a whole host of new resources around working with MPOs, both for advocates as well as for the metropolitan planning organizations, some of the better practices and policies out there. So for those of you in the room, I might point out Darren Fluchet here from the Advocacy Advance team. We've got postcards in the back about Advocacy Advance, and for those 14,000 people online, you can go to advocacyadvance.org.
Can I add one more thing about the equity issue, which is a personal anecdote? So as mentioned in the introduction, I currently live in DC. I used to live in another jurisdiction in this metro area that will remain nameless. And it was very sort of ethnically and economically diverse neighborhood. And at a time when one of the major thoroughfares through the neighborhood was up to be sort of repaved, reconstructed, the neighborhood really pushed for improvements to that street to complete the street, crosswalk improvements, medians, things for the safety of pedestrians close to a metro station. And it became clear that not only was that not sort of a focus of this jurisdiction, that particular neighborhood, but there was also a concern that if they made such improvements in that neighborhood, they viewed this neighborhood as part of the affordable housing picture for that jurisdiction, and if they made such improvements, they were concerned that things would take off and people would want to live in this neighborhood. And I think, to me, everybody deserves to live in neighborhoods with complete streets, and that is indicative of how much we failed to meet the demand for complete streets in all of our neighborhoods, that would be a concern. Thankfully, things have changed since I lived there, and they've since made improvements to the street and are doing that around the metro area.
A couple of other questions from the live stream. One for Colleen. One of our watchers wants to know more about the Green Lanes project stress test.
Okay, my knowledge of the Green project. So DDOT, our Active Transportation Group, has partnered. I think they're one of maybe 10 cities that have partnered with the Green Project to look at different ways to qualify and quantify bike lanes, make it more comfortable for people to go out and make it easier to get bike lanes implemented. I don't work on the project, so unfortunately I don't have many of the details of it, but
Where could they get more information?
there, I think Kyle actually mentioned he has been working with them.
I can help. The city of Memphis is also a part of the Green Lane project along with DC. And so there's an analysis that was created by Peter Firth from Northeastern University that analyzed sort of the current level of service analysis that's currently used as an official capacity for measuring the condition and measuring the suitability of a roadway for bicycle travel. But the analysis is a little lacking in that it doesn't distinguish, for instance, between, it doesn't provide the distinguishment for some of the new bicycle facilities that are coming along, namely protected bicycle facilities where there's buffers between moving cars and bikes. And so he worked with some individuals to develop, it's a GIS-based tool that allows you to enter in roadway data into your tool, and it does a stress test. It provides, I think, a number of 1 through 4 about how would a user sort of perceive, how uncomfortable would they be if they were riding on this roadway under today's current conditions. And the beauty of the tool is that it allows you to test out, let's say you have a roadway that has the worst stress possible, and you want to go out and put a bicycle lane on it. Well, you can change the data in your GIS database and allow you to test out before you implement something whether or not your implementation of that facility actually has an impact on the stress. And so before you're spending dollars, you can get a true measure of, are you actually going to be improving the stress level? Are you unimproving the stress level? And should you do more or should you do less? And it's sort of a decision-making tool that I hope in the future.
Great, another implementation tool. That's wonderful.
And if I can just add, we were looking for something different because a lot of times level of service doesn't serve the bicyclists and the pedestrians. It's still a comparison to how vehicles get through. And so we were looking for a different way to get some qualitative information.
Right. People versus, people, goods, and services versus just moving cars. Another
Roger, we
question.
got a couple more questions?
Yeah.
I want to get to one here.
Good afternoon. I'm Jana Lynett with AARP, and before I get to my question, I want to congratulate Memphis and the National Complete Streets Coalition and coalition partners for reaching this milestone. AARP is absolutely thrilled that we've been able to be part of this movement, and we certainly will continue our work at the state and local levels to get another 500 policies passed in the coming couple of years. So my question really gets back to the heart of implementation. It's coming out of some technical assistance that I've been providing in the last couple of weeks to a city in Kansas. And the question is whether you all feel that once a place has a policy, whether the development of a streets design guide would be most beneficial, or getting performance measures put into that jurisdiction's policies would have a bigger bang for the buck. I guess in terms of level of effort, in terms of really seeing change over time. Particularly our local reps, Kyle and Colleen, if you have an opinion on this, I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. I think in Memphis's case, it's both. We are already measuring performance measures against before we even had the policy. So we're measuring things like mode share. We're measuring and tracking accident data, measuring a number of sort of key performance measures that we think will indicate to us whether or not the changes in the investment that we're making are having an actual positive impact in our community, which is we're tracking business areas about their economic development situations that are through there. And so I think some of those things are key, but I mentioned sort of in my remarks that moving forward, sustainability of this policy is really on our mind in terms of what happens 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, in terms of what does the policy passed in 2013 mean in 2025 and 2030. And that's where we think that the design manual plays a big role in sort of how Memphis is going to be moving things forward. We're seeing this not really as a design manual that provides you X's and O's and measures the dots, you know, what's the width of the lane and all that. We think those things are important, but we think that the design manual is going to be more about the internal dialogue that occurs when decisions are being made about design. How do we reach out to the community to find out what's the most important? How do we go through our internal processes? Anybody who's ever worked with the government, you know that internal processes are a convoluted process, but how do we navigate that better in a more efficient way that Complete Streets implementation is instinctual and it's routine. It's not even really thought of as a special thing so much. And so I think it's a kind of a bold approach.
I would agree with that, and I would say that performance measures with the new MAP 21 requirements it's going to start skewing a lot towards that. It already has to a certain degree, but that's going to become even more important for reporting purposes.
Was there another question?
I think we just have one more from the audience.
Yeah, I'm John Wetmore with pedestrians.org. Recently, federal DOT launched a new initiative on pedestrian safety. Is there much interaction between the highway safety offices and other people dealing with safety and the people implementing Complete Streets policies? What's going on there?
Great question. Who wants to start with that?
Not often enough. A lot of opportunity there. I mean, I think, again, Complete Streets are really on the proactive end of, you know, trying the preventative end of a lot of the pedestrian safety, and often what safety officers are looking at, you know, sort of mitigating factors. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity there, and again, another opportunity for partnership.
So I would say there's always room to do more and become better. But I would say also our policy was developed in 2010, so we don't necessarily have a standalone group that is just working on Complete Streets. It has begun to infiltrate throughout all of the different administrations within DDOT, and there are 5 of them. And we are always meeting with our federal partners, discussions, face-to-face meetings. We now work a block and a half away from them. So from the DDOT perspective, I would say there's a lot of collaboration there.
Great. I'm going to do a final question. I'm going to come down the panel. We've come a long way with Complete Streets, and we've still got a ways to go. But you know, just for the benefit of the people watching and listening, who inspires your Complete Streets work? Cities, regions, professional organizations, specific individuals. You know, you guys, you're in this. You're committed to it. Who inspires you? Jeff?
Well, I'm certainly inspired by my peers in bicycle and pedestrian advocacy who you know, are really still trying to overcome huge odds and very entrenched systems and an infrastructure that we have amassed over decades that makes it very difficult to bicycle and walk safely. I mean, we know that just in bicycling alone, that 60% plus of Americans are interested but concerned and often don't bicycle. We're all pedestrians, and we can all think of many a street that we wouldn't dare think of trying to cross or frankly want to walk along. So there's a lot of work to be done. It's going to take many, many years still, And so I think every citizen who really realizes that opportunity, that they can have, make a difference and make their street safer and more complete, those are my heroes.
Great. Darren, what's inspiring you?
I continue to be inspired by Barbara McCann, who led this group at the beginning, and by Roger and the folks who are staffing the Complete Streets Coalition right now, and the other people who are working in this field and doing so much and are so dedicated to improving communities. And I also am just continually inspired by the communities that I visit, both personally and professionally, where people are realizing the full potential of their communities, whether they're small towns or big cities, wherever, when they are completing the streets and activating the streets and allowing for people to have transportation choices.
When we started the Move DC plan, we asked ourselves who we were doing this for and came up with if an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old can move around easily, comfortably, and however they want within our city, then our plan will be a success. So I would say it's the children in the city, and more are being born here and moving in, and then the elderly. And they are also coming back to the city to enjoy their retirement. So the people of the city, particularly those end age groups.
Echo that, all modes, all people. But the word millennials hasn't come up yet, at least not in that word. But let's talk about that. A potential game changer in travel behavior. The millennials like the excitement of places. They're very appreciative of transportation options and alternatives. There we go, right? The future is pointing that way. Forward-looking policies, forward-looking complete streets.
Yeah, I would say the neighborhoods in Memphis and the residents that embody those neighborhoods. And I think too often in the past, cities and governments sort of prescribe solutions to problems that may or may not exist. And so, through my work at the city and in previous work in bicycle advocacy in Memphis prior to working with the city, the people of a neighborhood know what they need best. They know how they want to get around, and being able to not only have a conversation with people about what's important to them, what's important in their neighborhood, but then being also in a position to deliver those things that are important to them is a real sort of aspirational thing. And Memphis is, as of right now, installing its very first protected bicycle lane in the city of Memphis, and that's a direct result of a planning process that we went through with the neighborhood back in February. And so I was out there yesterday riding my bike on the half-finished bike lane, and there's an extreme joy and sort of an exhilaration of being a part of a process where you brought community stakeholders together, worked out in fine detail about what their expectations were, and then 6 months later being able to deliver that to them. And so that's an inspiring thing.
That's wonderful. I'm going to bring up somebody who inspires me, our chair of the coalition, Rich Weaver, to close the event.
Well, before we, the inspirational nature of this panel needs another round of applause, first of all. They're terrific. And, it's an honor to chair the coalition and have the range and breadth of folks that are engaged, from AARP, traffic engineers, and our realtors and bike advocates and transit in the mix. And it's rare you have a coalition that can really come together and make a movement as much as we've done. And I echo Jeff's words about we're going to move forward on the next 500 policies sooner than later, get this going, because I think that is so critical to keep this momentum going. And these kinds of policies and the policies that have that incorporate a good implementation plan are the ones that I'm really paying attention to. Where APTA has been, I'm really excited that APTA has been able to have a complete street session in almost every one of our technical conferences. We're certainly going to be in Chicago, a little plug for our APTA annual meeting, on September 29th through October 2nd, and that will be in Chicago, and we are having a complete street session and bringing in the city transit partners that can really affect this. I think those are really critical. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I want to thank everyone for coming today. And again, want to thank our sponsors, Nelson Nygaard, let me get my glasses on, for the rest of these. Nelson Nygaard, Bike Walk Tennessee, and the Association of Pedestrian Bicycle Professionals. And again, look forward to getting more of your support and help building the coalition for the next 500 policies. So thank you very much.